Hey everyone, it's Lisa from the blog farmhouseonboone.com, and today I am going to be doing a From Scratch Cooks Kitchen Essentials. Now, I did a video like this back when I first started my YouTube channel, so years ago, and I've been having some requests for doing this type of video again, if there's any updates. Also, some of you just didn't see that video because it's been a while and a lot of you are more newly following along. So there are a few things that are different and I'm just going to dive in. Now, I divided this into must-haves and nice-to-haves. So if you are just getting into cooking from scratch and the list is overwhelming, there are a lot of things you just simply don't have to have, but they would be nice. So you could start there. Start with the must-haves and then work your way through it. You can get by with very few tools making food from scratch, so make sure that you remember that and don't feel like overwhelmed. These are things that I've collected over about 12 years now as I have grown in my cooking abilities and trying to cook everything from scratch. So a lot of this has been collected at thrift shops as gifts, and then just things that I purchased over the years. So let's dive into the must-haves. First on the list, and if you follow along with me, you're probably like, I know, I've heard it 1,000 times, is cast iron. It is so versatile in the kitchen. I use it daily. It is the most essential that I have on this list. As you can see, I keep my collection of cast iron out on the stove at all times. The proper care for cast iron does require that you dry it thoroughly between each wash and to also not really wash it that much. So oftentimes I'm just wiping it out and leaving it out on my stove. Now, I have 2 10-inch skillets and 2 8-inch skillets. Now, these are just ones that I've acquired over the years. I really don't need more than 4 because I only have 4 burners. I do get 4 skillets going at a time, and there are the occasional time where I will make like a chicken pot pie. I'll make 2 of them and we'll only eat 1, and I'll just put 1 with foil over the top straight into the fridge. And so sometimes my cast iron is out of commission because it does have a leftover in the fridge. And so I guess there are a few times when I could use more than 4, but really honestly, 4 will do. And if you aren't quite confident enough to run 4 burners at one time, like when I'm making crepes or pancakes or sourdough English muffins, I will have 4 burners going at one time, and that way I can make a large quantity for my family. But honestly, I would start with 1 skillet, probably either the 10 or 12 inch, and then eventually 2 would be really nice, but you can get by doing almost anything with that. Now, I have this as the next thing on my list, a cast iron Dutch oven. I use this for soups and broth, but I also use it for baking sourdough bread. Now, you are going to need some kind of large pot to make soup in, and going back, I would probably just go straight to cast iron because then you can use it dual purpose for also baking really beautiful loaves of bread. Now, for many years, I used my stainless steel pot, and honestly, I still do. But if I could only have one, I'd probably choose the cast iron. Now, there are times when you almost want to use stainless steel as opposed to cast iron because such liquid heavy things do better. Like, for example, I strain my milk kefir into this large stainless steel pot. It's the perfect size to put my strainer over and just strain the milk kefir grains straight in here. So you will need something large to make soup with. This is really large, so I like it because I can fit more in it. Stainless steel would also be great, and this is also dual purpose for straining off kefir grains. So with that being said, obviously also a strainer is a must-have. Now, going back to the pots category, something to cook smaller things. Now, this is actually new. I always, up until recently, just used a stainless steel. Honestly, either one is perfect. This, you can see, is well used. We use this to make popcorn pretty much exclusively. It's too small for soup or pasta for our larger family, but it's great for popcorn, and so that's what we use this for. Also good if you're doing like a small sauce or just something, anything small. Like I'm picturing a jam or a sauce for ice cream. I don't know, anything that you don't need a large quantity of. One small saucepan is really good for that, whether you do stainless steel or copper. And then also obviously popcorn. The next thing on the list is large bowls. I have them in stainless steel and glass. Now currently, I have my largest glass one sitting here on the stove making sourdough bread. And then my favorite stoneware bowl currently has the compost in it because we just use whatever bowl is sitting around, and that's the one that's on the counter. So at first, you'll need at least one large bowl for mixing, for making a batch of sourdough bread or whatever kind of bread you'll need to obviously allow it to rise. So for that, my first preference is stoneware or glass. I do also like my stainless steels for certain applications, but I prefer the glass and stoneware over them. The next thing on my list is funnels. I don't know why, but if you're doing a lot of from scratch cooking, you will find the need for funnels. I am using them all the time. I will be making kefir and have to put some prepared kefir into a jar and then fill it back up with milk, and so I'll use the funnel for that. Or if I'm canning like applesauce, this wide mouth one comes in really handy. I am just constantly putting things into mason jars and using funnels for it. I can't even think of all the ways, but I do know that I use them all the time. Okay, the next one, and I debated on whether I should include this in the nice to haves or the must haves, but I'm going to go ahead and include it here in the must haves because of a few reasons. And that is the Instant Pot. Now, I know you can totally get by without an Instant Pot. Many of you probably don't have an Instant Pot, but I find it so useful for a few things. One is yogurt. I've never found an easier way to keep milk at the proper temperature for the proper amount of time and in such large batches. Yes, there are a lot of other ways to do it. Trust me, I've tried them all, but to make a large batch, a gallon of yogurt at a time, the easiest way that I have ever found is with an Instant Pot. So for yogurt alone, I would own one. And then the second is for bone broth. Yes, you can make it on the stove. I've done it for many years. This is why it could move down to the nice to haves, because it is totally possible to make yogurt and bone broth without it. It just does make your life easier. And I get it, it's a large appliance. It's not pretty, but it really has saved me so much time. The next one on my list is the Berkey water filter. I've talked about this so much on here. I did a whole review on the Berkey water filter. I've shown you how to set it up. You all know I love the Berkey. For making things like ferments and sourdough, it's important that you have a water source that isn't going to interfere with the good bacteria that you're trying to cultivate. And the best, most economical filter that I have found is the Berkey. Now, Berkey does have a bundles deal, which includes the fluoride filters and the regular filters. So I will leave a link for that down in the description box below. We've had ours for 10 plus years now and we love it. All right, the next one on the list is a blender. Now, when I originally did this, we had a different blender. We've since upgraded to the Ninja. Now, the top isn't on here because it is currently sitting in the refrigerator with smoothie, which is where it is most of the time, because we make daily smoothies and a lot of times we'll make way more than we need just so that people can throughout the day get a little bit more smoothie. So kefir smoothies is the main thing that we use it for. But I also found that I use my food processor a lot less once having a blender that has more blades on it and can handle more applications. So in my original video, the food processor was really crucial, but I actually can use this for a lot of things I would otherwise use a food processor for, except things like chopping veggies. So I'll get more to that later for sauerkraut. So I do still keep my food processor for that, but it did move it down to the nice to haves. Now, of course, there's other brands like the Vitamix that people really rave about. I haven't tried it, but a good blender is going to be crucial. Even a cheap blender, you're just going to need a blender. Smoothies are a great way to get in probiotics and nutrition. We have them every day, and so they're pretty crucial. The next one on the list is wood cutting boards. I have my cast iron Dutch oven sitting on it because I don't sit cast iron directly on my countertops. They make rust rings, so I'll put this back shortly. But a good cutting board. I have 3 wood cutting boards that I use all the time, just for everything. If you're cooking from scratch, you're gonna be cutting up onions, garlic, and potatoes and carrots pretty much every day. The base of every meal that you cook will always be fresh vegetables that you chop. So you're gonna use them constantly. And with that being said, the next one on the list is good knives. Now I get asked all the time what I recommend for knives, and then I also get people who tell me that I need to sharpen my knives, which is true. But I have never spent a ton of money on knives. I do have a few really nice knives that I've acquired from thrift shops, and sometimes I do just need to sharpen them. So a knife sharpener and just some sturdy knives. Now you can buy a set. Again, I have just picked mine up over the years at thrift shops. I just pick ones that have pretty handles that feel nice and substantial. I have a few that are Pampered Chef and Cutco, but they actually did just come from thrift shops and they can be sharpened. But you will need a nice set of knives or a collected set of knives. Okay, the next one on the list is wood spoons. I just find these usually at Walmart, somewhere cheap. I haven't found that it really matters necessarily where I get them, just so long as I take care of them. We use them for everything, just serving potatoes, sauerkraut, anything, stirring. I'm always using my wooden spoons. They serve me really well and they last a really long time. The next thing on the list is stainless spatulas and silicone. I find it really strange that I still don't know which one of these is called a spatula. I Googled it, apparently nobody knows. So either a spatula or a bowl scraper, or a spatula or a turner, you are going to want some stainless steel turners. I have 2 here. I don't know where this one came from and I get asked about it all the time. I love this small one. This one is the Pioneer Woman one from Walmart. I just thought it had a pretty handle, but we always choose this one. So unless this one is dirty, we are always just using this one, because something about being able to have the control of a nice short handle, we all love this one and prefer it, but this one is also a great option. Now the thing you want to avoid is a plastic turner. I've been at Airbnbs on vacation or at friend's house where I've had to use one like that, and they wouldn't be good for cast iron because they'd probably melt with how hot it is, or maybe they're probably heat resistant, but still, they just feel flimsy and like you can't get in there. And so that's why I prefer stainless steel. And then I have this Pampered Chef silicone one. It's been used a lot, but I do find that I use it all the time. It's just one, I don't have any more than that. Eventually I should probably replace it. But I love using this because I hate waste. And so anytime we're at the bottom of like a bowl of waffle batter or something like that, I will scrape it with this. So I find that very handy and essential. The next one on the list is 1/2 gallon mason jars. I use these things all the time. We use them to get our milk pickup, but I also have a whole lot more that I use for other things. So the number one way I like to use these is for fermenting. I always have kefir going on the counter in this, sauerkraut. Wide mouth mason jars will serve you so well. So the 1/2 gallon is really good for large quantities of things like kefir. I make that at a 1/2 gallon at a time. Also, water kefir is good in a 1/2 gallon jar. But I also like to fill in with quart wide mouth jars and pint wide mouth jars. That way, the special lids I buy fit all of them. They're also good for, like the quart ones I use for my smoothies with the straw lid. And the pint ones are just good drinking glasses without any lid at all. I like how they're all interchangeable. And so I keep just a stash of wide mouth mason jars. I also keep the straw lids and the reusable straws. This is how I serve smoothies to the kids. We don't really have any sippy cups that work very well for smoothies. And so we'll just use some of these, and even for Daniel, just put these on with the ring in the smaller wide mouth jars, and that's a perfect way to serve smoothies. Another on the must-have list is a cheese grater. I no longer buy pre-grated cheese. I haven't for many years. You will find that if you're switching from shredded cheese to the block cheese and shredding it yourself, it is such a difference. they coat it with something so it doesn't stick together. It just doesn't melt right. I could never use it after switching over to this. And so I use this thing daily. I'm always grating cheese. It also allows you to find a nice source for cheese. So if you find a nice raw or organic cheese, you will most likely have to grate it. I also use this side for Parmesan. I use the really tiny side for lemon zest. You'll just need it all the time. Okay, the final thing on my must-haves are glass storage containers for leftovers. We are a leftover eating family. Even if there's just a small amount, with the amount of time and effort you put into cooking foods from scratch, you're not going to throw any amount away, at least I'm not. And so I will put them in the refrigerator in a glass storage container with a silicone lid, and then we'll have a leftover day where we just eat little bits of what we've been eating all week, obviously separate, but I can put those all in the oven since we don't have a microwave, pull it all out, and everybody can just eat a little bit of whatever they liked the best from the week. Okay, now we're going to dive into the nice to haves. So first one on that are all of these sourdough bread baking supplies. This was not on my original list, but I've really fallen in love with making sourdough bread. It is just so good and healthy, and you can almost be artsy with it too, creating beautiful designs. And the Banneton baskets are great for that. Now, the reason why this is on the nice to have is you can use just a glass bowl with a tea towel to shape your bread. You do not have to have one of these, but they are nice and they are also pretty, so they can sit out. Another is the bench scraper. These are also nice for baking sourdough bread, but again, you can use something else to scrape it off the counter. You do not have to have it. And then I have the razors to make the designs. So again, just nice. I like having my sourdough bread baking supplies. And if you get into sourdough, you might eventually want to, but you do not have to. The next one on the list is a mixer. Since my last video, I have started making a no-knead sourdough bread, so I don't actually use the mixer to make my bread, which is how it moved down to the nice to haves, but I do use the mixer for lots of things. I still like it for baking things. I like to, make cookies and to whip cream or make a meringue. It is nice to have a mixer. It's also nice to use for the pasta roller cutter attachment. So I have the KitchenAid, and having that roller cutter is actually really nice because I can make pasta from scratch pretty easily. But there are other ways to do it. Again, it's just nice. And I do like having the KitchenAid because it looks pretty on my counter. Now, I used to recommend the Bosch, and honestly, the Bosch is still a nicer mixer. People are like, what's wrong with the Bosch? Nothing. It's actually such a nice mixer. I actually gave it to my aunt. She bakes for a living. She caters, things like that. And I just wanted a pretty mixer on my counter at all times. The Bosch I always stashed back away, so I wanted something that could stay out, and I felt like the KitchenAid was pretty enough to do that. And so I actually do end up using it even more because I don't have to lug it out, and it really is a nice thing to have in your kitchen. The next nice to have is fermenting weights and lids. You can see I'm currently using those both here behind me to make sauerkraut. It does make the process a little easier, and they are pretty inexpensive. You could also use rocks inside of a Ziploc bag, a folded up cabbage leaf, a loose lid instead of this lid that allows gases to escape. So you don't have to have it, but it is something that just, once you start doing something a lot, it starts to become quite beneficial to invest in the right tools. So, maybe just make ferments for a while before investing, make sure you like it, but once you're doing it a lot, and it saves you a ton of time, it usually makes sense to invest, because whenever something saves you time, that means that you'll have more time to spend time with your family or cook more things. And pretty soon a purchase does outweigh the cost and the benefits do outweigh. The next is ice cream maker. I love having an ice cream maker. Now, it's not necessary. I don't even make ice cream that often, but when we do have access to a lot of fresh cream, or in the summer, it's nice to have. It is not something I use a ton. It's stashed away most of the time, but I do like it, and I wouldn't get rid of my Cuisinart ice cream maker. I will be leaving links all down in the description box. So if you're curious about exactly which item I have that I'm talking about, there will be links down there. All right, the next on the nice to have list is a grain mill and 5-gallon buckets with gamma lids for storage. So if you decide that you want to start milling your own grains, I just made some this morning to put some whole wheat flour in my sourdough bread. I have the Nutri Mill. I've had it for many years. I eventually would like to upgrade to the mock mill. Again, I'll leave a link down below because it's so pretty. It wouldn't need to be stashed away. It can just sit out on the counter. So that would be really nice. But my Nutri Mill is still going so well that I'm just gonna continue to use it. I've had it for probably 10 years now. Eventually it does save you money because you can buy grains in bulk. I buy 25 or 50-pound bags of wheat and einkorn and kamut. It really is such an easy thing. You just put the grain in and put this little thing in and let it go through, and you have your own freshly made whole wheat flour. So it is something that I would never not have in my kitchen, and it does end up saving money. Also, as far as grain storage, food grade 5-gallon buckets and the twist off gamma lids make all the difference. It makes it really easy. Now I do have a whole video on the subject of milling your own grains. I will leave a link to that down in the description box below so that if you're brand new to that and you want to hear more about how we store and what we mill and what I use it for, you can visit that video. Okay, the next on the list is an immersion blender. This is so useful for making sauces or pureeing a soup. You can use your blender for this, which is why this is not on the must-haves list. But it is really nice. It's like 20 bucks and it's way less dishes. So I used my blender for so many years because I didn't want to buy one of these. But this is so cool because you can make hardly any mess after you blend something. You literally just wash this versus your whole blender with the blade. It's just a lot more to do. Plus our blender is almost always sitting in the refrigerator with a smoothie from breakfast. So I would have to pour it into another glass and wash the blender, pour the soup in from the pot, put it back in the pot versus just being able to blend this. So I keep this right here in a drawer by the stove. I have an outlet in my stove and then close to the stove, and I do find that I'm using this all the time. The next one on the nice to haves list is a food processor. It got moved down because I can make so much with this now that I couldn't do in my old blender. The one reason that I still like my food processor is if I'm making a large batch of sauerkraut. Now, if you're making a small batch, it's really not that hard just to cut it up finely. Actually, last time I made sauerkraut, I just had a couple heads of cabbage that I needed to use up, and so I didn't want to get out the food processor. I just cut it up. You could always do that. You wouldn't have to have a food processor, especially if you have a nicer blender. So that's why it's on the nice to haves. You might find a few applications for it, but unless you're doing a large batch, it's really not even worth it to get it out and wash it. Now, of course, it also does have a cheese grater attachment, so you could use it for that, but such a mess. I find it's just so much easier just to do it really quickly. Okay, the last one I'm throwing on my nice to haves list are these Danish dough hooks. My mother-in-law gave these to me recently. I think she saw a Facebook ad and thought it looked like something I would like. I find these so handy for any application that you'd use a whisk for, and they're also really beautiful. So they sit here by my stove. I'm using them all the time. But again, you could get by with just a fork or a whisk. You do not have to have them, but they are pretty fun. All right, I've been thinking about this list for a few days, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some of your from scratch cooking must-haves? What do you think that I missed? Maybe you will tell me something that would really be life-changing for me in my kitchen. Maybe you have something that is just so useful, saved you so much time. I'm always open to hearing about that. I'm all about cooking from scratch, but I'm not necessarily about making life harder for myself or wasting time. So let me know what it is that saves you time and makes your from scratch cooking life a little bit easier. Again, visit the links down in the description box below to find out some sources and things, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you are brand new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I make 2 new videos every week on food from scratch, natural living, and a handmade home. Thank you so much for stopping by the farmhouse.